Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third class on the Nativity of Christ. This evening, I wanted to discuss the Nativity icon. Oftentimes, when learning about iconography in the Orthodox tradition, this icon is the one that's used because it is so classic. It's been repeated so consistently in so many of its forms, and its meaning is so beautifully at once illustrative and also succinct. And so I want to talk about some of what's going on in this icon and show you exactly how it teaches the Nativity story. The first thing I'd like you to remember is that in most of human history, people weren't literate. The overwhelming majority of people, probably 90% of Christians who have ever lived, couldn't read or write. And so in order for them to learn about the faith, they needed holy images. We are somewhat distinct in Eastern Christianity, particularly the Orthodox Church, for necessarily incorporating holy images into our regular worship. There is virtually not a service that goes on that doesn't incorporate holy images. At the very least, we'll have an icon of Christ or of the feast of the day at the entrance to the church. And in many services, especially churches outside the calendar year, so-called paraliturgical services like the Akathist to the Mother of God, Paraclesis to the Mother of God, or other services of supplication, you'll have an icon kind of front and center. Now, enough of the background. I want to get right into what it means. The first thing you'll notice is that this is really busy. There's a lot of stuff going on, and you'll find some nativity icons that are less cluttered. But this is part of the tradition of this icon, and it serves a very important purpose. Our Lord was not born into a peaceful world. He was born into chaos. He was born into a world of disorder that needed righting. And so he came amongst a multitude of wrongs, coming to bring order and rightness and goodness. Now, the key to understanding any icon, of course, is looking towards, like, what is front and center. And you can tell immediately, looking up and down, and then horizontally, what is in the middle of the icon. Notice the figure of the Mother of God. She's reclined. She's significantly larger as a figure than every other person in the icon. Above her is the icon of Christ, and we always can pinpoint the icon of Christ because he has this cross in the circle area above the head. This is called the corona, and this always designates saints. And we have in little bitty writings right here, O On, the one who is. Christ is the existing one. That's the same phrase that was used when Moses encountered the burning bush. Who shall I say sent me? Moses asked. The bush responds in a voice that, of course, was from God himself, the one who is. Tell them, I am sent you. And so we're acknowledging Jesus Christ himself. He is the one who is. He is the I am. And so the focus of this icon is of St. Mary and Christ himself. You see scenes of heaven with the angels, a star literally from the heavens, and then, of course, earthly scenes. You've got farm animals and those who tend them. You have scholars traveling from afar. You have midwives. And a really curious scene down here that we're going to get into here in a little bit. Looking front and center, you don't see what you often see in icons of the Mother of God. Oftentimes, when you see an icon of St. Mary, she is looking and pointing at her son, whom she's holding as a child. But here St. Mary is looking at someone else, and it's somewhat unique in this particular rendition of the icon. Notice she's covering her mouth with her hand. She's not looking at our Lord. Her focus is elsewhere. And who is she looking at? She's looking at another person that we know is a saint because we see this same corona around him, this what oftentimes people call a halo, but it's filled in. She's looking at St. Joseph. Now, why is she looking at St. Joseph? And what about St. Joseph? Well, St. Joseph doesn't look very happy, does he? He's a man deep in thought. He's got the thinker's pose, doesn't he? His fist is curled up. He's considering something very deeply. And he's clearly having a conversation with someone. And notice what's different about this person talking to St. Joseph versus many of the other persons in this icon. He doesn't have what St. Mary has, certainly doesn't have what our Lord has, nor the angels. This is not a saint. This is not some prophet, or this isn't some holy person encountering our Lord. This is someone who instead is dressed peculiarly. Now, these people don't have coronas around them. And so simply not having a corona doesn't mean that we know that person was damned, or certainly not that they're evil. But we do see that they're wearing normal clothes. Now, what about this guy? He's wearing clothes of animal skins. Remember, after Adam and Eve fell in the garden, after they sinned the first time, they became aware of their nakedness. God didn't punish them by making them wear clothes. Instead, they became aware of their nakedness. And out of mercy, God fashioned them garments. But nonetheless, those animal skins came to represent a fallenness. And so this person talking to Joseph, okay, not in an overtly manipulative way. Look, it's very subtle. He's got his hand resting on a staff. He's talking to St. Joseph, trying to sell him a story. Now, what might St. Joseph be considering? What, in this moment of the birth of Christ, might any human man consider after his betrothed, in other words, the woman he's engaged to, had just given birth to someone that he had not had any sort of relationship with at all in a sexual way? He's probably wondering, is this legitimate? Was the story really how she said it went, or was there something else going on? And so St. Mary is looking at St. Joseph, wondering whether she's still going to have a husband, wondering whether he is going to believe the promise given to her and the miracle worked within her own body, or whether he's going to reject it. Notice everything that takes place here is right around the entrance to a cave, and Joseph had to leave that cave to go off and question. Now, what's going on in the cave? Well, you see these two animals here, an ox and a donkey, an oxen and a donkey. The cave, according to Eastern tradition, is oftentimes where animals were kept. It's a manger in common English speech. That's the place where animals were fed and watered, where they were bedded. And it was common that this took place in a cave. And so we have this tradition that our Lord, of course, was born in a cave, not just in a stall for animals, but in a place carved out of rock, either naturally or artificially, to make a place of safety. Now, about the ox and the oxen and the donkey, rather, what's this alluding to? Well, oxen were beasts of burdens. They were reliable, they were strong, they were hardworking, and what's more, they were able to be eaten. Any Jewish family who worked the land would have an oxen to do the work in the field, and because they were ceremonially clean to eat, they could be eaten afterwards. Donkeys, however, aren't quite so reliable. They're known, of course, for being moody and irritable, and what's more, they couldn't be eaten by Jewish people. And so this represents then the two types of people that our Lord came to save: Jewish people and Gentiles. Both sorts of people find a home in our Lord. Now, we see a similar theme here, right? We know that the shepherds came to venerate our Lord, to worship him. Well, who else came? Well, these guys are some of the biggest hits of the Nativity season, right? The three magi. And a lot of speculation goes into what were the gifts of the magi. Well, what did it mean? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Well, frankly, there's no great consensus in our tradition as to what those gifts mean. What's important, however, is that these men would have been scholars of their time, learned men, something equivalent to top university professors. And they saw a star, a bright star in the sky that was peculiar. And they followed that star that appeared to be moving and shimmering. Now, I literally could not pick a better time to give this presentation right now than right about now. Because for the first time in nearly 800 years, stars have aligned. Two planets have aligned that look an awful lot like a star, Jupiter and Saturn, for the first time in 800 years. And it was bright, and it looked different. And people who were used to looking to the sky and looking to the stars for a meaning, they would have seen that and thought something remarkable about it. And so you have oxen and donkey are present around Christ, Jew and Gentile, and you also have peasantly and common, uneducated, and here you have important and educated and exotic and everything. So our Lord brings disparate groups together. This is an important theme here. Now look at another group that you have down here. What are these women doing? Well, of course, they're washing our Lord. I think at its most basic level, this is teaching us once again, our Lord was not born as a ghost. He was born as a baby. And when babies are born, they're messy. They need to be cleaned, and so they were washed. This will, of course, also prefigure an ancient part of this festal cycle, because we had originally, remember what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, how the nativity of our Lord and the theophany, or his baptism, those were originally one composite service. And so we see here in this washing a prefiguring to his baptism. And why was Christ baptized again? Well, it wasn't because he needed any sins washed away. No, our Lord was baptized because when our Lord encounters water, the water itself is made holy. Now, want to go back up here for a moment. This kind of stuff. Notice this big dark area. This is called a mandorla. And anytime you see this, and sometimes it's oval-shaped and sometimes it's circular, in this case it's kind of like a half circle. And you see another one up here. This is, to use sci-fi language, this is like a portal. This is a way to depict the junction of two completely different realms. The eternal, right? And this is the color of the sky, isn't it? The night sky, dark, dark blue. You even have stars here kind of depicted. Into the earth. And this star, which appeared, showing the wise men and even the shepherds the way to our Lord, this appeared, an event outside of time, once and for all given, that in fact occurred inside time. And so the heavenly comes to the earthly, the eternal comes to the temporal, and all of this took place here. Now, I want to end with this. We see another little mandorla here behind the oxen and the donkey. And why is the cave a portal to that which is to come? Well, what happens in a cave in another 30 years or so? Death itself will be conquered. And our Lord, who was born in a cave, will once again return to life after he truly died and descended into Hades. He'll come back with glory and honor. Now, notice our Lord right here. What is he wearing? Well, we all know from the Christmas carols, right? Swaddling clothes. What are swaddling clothes about? Well, at once, it's to bind and to restrict. If your kids are like my children were when they were born, they're always, poking and touching around, and mine kept cutting up their face with their little fingernails, and we kept trying to trim them short, but we couldn't get them short enough, and so you swaddle their arms up so they can't hurt themselves because they're not very coordinated yet. You also swaddle them up because babies oftentimes like to be felt like they're snug as a bug, right? They're wrapped up. But of course, there's another time when our Lord is going to be wrapped up and bound. And this prefigures his burial wrappings. And so we have so much beauty and symbolism in this icon. From the chaos that our Lord came into, and the death, which is prefigured, and the resurrection, which is also shown a foretype, and then in its fullness. All of this here is beautiful within the icon. You have everything that makes a novel or any story great. Patience, faith, hope, compassion, temptation, everything. And so I hope you've learned something from this presentation on the Nativity icon. I hope it's meaningful to you. If you have any more questions, feel free to let me know. I'd love to talk to you more about it. Until then, I wish you a most blessed Feast of the Nativity. I hope to see you tomorrow.